podcasting, creating content. This is one of the ways that a lot of people think that they can just come in and make it look easy and make a lot of money and do this, do that. I want to ask you this: what makes people think that they can just jump into this game, jump into your world, and become an overnight sensation? Let the people know what it really takes in order for to be a successful podcast and just make successful content. So today I got my man Jay Johnson. We go way back. This is more than just some internet stuff, some internet friendship. This a real brotherhood, a real friendship, man. And luckily, he's been doing this podcast thing for years. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it's approaching a decade. To be completely honest with you, it might be a little bit longer than that. But I got my notebook, man. So this is really gonna be a lesson for me too, because I'm gonna be writing down some notes. I'm gonna be writing down some pointers and things like this, because this is, he's been doing this for a long time. So we want to definitely take heed to what's going on in the podcast world and the content creation world, because things are changing for the good and the bad. So we want to jump into that today. So I brought none other than Jason Johnson, man. He goes by Jay Johnson 313. He's the pod godfather. We call him the pioneer podcast. He's from Shop Talk Podcast. He also has This Week in Culture and a host of other things going on, man. So I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then we're gonna jump right into it, because this is gonna be a jam-packed episode because a lot of people want to know about this topic. So we're gonna definitely jump into it. So Jay Johnson, man, give him a little spiel about what's going on,
man,
who you are, and what you got going on. Like I said,
man, I'm Jay Johnson. One half of the culture, one half of everything is what I like to say. One half of Shop Talk Podcast, one half of This Week in Culture. I've been in this podcast game. It'll be 9 years in June. Yeah, 9 years in June. We've had the Shop Talk Podcast studio, which has been home to over 250 or so podcasts in the Metro Detroit area. We opened that up in like 2017. We our lease ended in like June. So I didn't renew the lease in that building, but in January, February, we come back in a new location. So yeah, man, this podcast stuff, I do all podcasts, audio, video. I've done shot a comedy special. Like I wasn't telling the jokes. I was just shooting, just shot the special.
jokes too, man. You got a couple jokes in you
For sure. And air checks. I've did some commercial work for Carhartt, shit, for Fago, voiceovers, anything audio and video. A multimedia professional is what my bio. I got a bio now, so
yeah, got to, man.
Yeah, man. But I appreciate you coming on the platform, man. I'm proud of you too, man. You doing your thing, man. I'm proud of you, man.
All right, man. Trying to, man. You know what? I have I tell people, like, in my family, blood or not, I got a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. So anytime I need some help, or anytime I need some guidance, or even motivation, I could just look to my left, look to my right, or pick my phone up, and call people like you. So I appreciate you too, and appreciate you bringing me on the platform for whatever business venture or whatever I was doing. It wasn't just finance or in this and that. It was a lot of stuff that I was doing over the years, man. So I appreciate it.
Man, I just thought about that. Yeah, we did the clothing, from the music, to the crypto. Like we didn't been through it all.
Yeah. So now 2025 is really shaping up for me personally to be. I'm gonna make this a real big content year for myself. So I got a bunch of different content things I want to bring out. Bunch of different businesses I want to start exploring. Podcasting, creating content. This is one of the ways that a lot of people think that they can just come in and make it look easy and make a lot of money and do this, do that. I said, no, hold on. They're not gonna listen to me, but they're gonna listen to somebody who's been doing it for a long time and who's been successful at it. So I want to ask you this: what makes people think that they can just jump into this game, jump into your world, and become an overnight sensation? I have seen it happen. You might go viral. That's with anything, though. But let the people know what it really takes in order to be a successful podcast and just make successful content over the years.
Yeah, I think what makes people think they can jump in and do it is because they saw somebody do it effortlessly, right? So, Four Agreements is one of my favorite books, and one of those are be impeccable with your word. Some people can just speak. They speak without the uns, the buts, the whole nine. They just perfect, right? And you will see that and be like, oh, I could. You feel so comfortable. You feel so captivated. Like, oh yeah, I can do that because it's like talking to my friend because they made you feel so comfortable and like, oh, I can do that. And it's so interesting when a group will come in or a couple will come in and like, hey, is this y'all first podcast? Y'all just looking for a new studio house? Like, no, this is our first podcast. So we put them headphones on and they were like, oh, I don't like my voice. They're like, I don't like how I sound.
It take a minute though to listen to
And,
yourself. It take a minute.
and they were like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna turn the mics on, I'm gonna be right outside. It was like, well, I don't know how to start. Like, what I'm supposed to say? I'm like, you supposed to figure that out
Yeah, before you get in
before you got here though. But what really makes it stick is the consistency. Um a lot of people will go viral, say, for a clip, right? So you may get a clip that goes viral and everybody watches that 30 seconds, but your podcast was an hour and a half. Did they listen to the whole hour and a half of their podcast? Um, if they did, all right, I listened to it, but like, what about next week? Am I going to tune in next week, the week after, or what have you? Um, it's a tough game when we started in 2016, before podcasts were super duper big. Pod had been around, but like, and before black people got into podcasting, essentially, it wasn't a whole bunch. So you'll see, man, I was happy, man. I got 30 people listening. Like, yo, we got 60 people listening. When that got to 100, it's like you couldn't tell me nothing, man. It's 100 people out here in the world like listening, and but those numbers are humbling to start off. But you never know who's listening. And with podcasting, once you are discovered, so to speak, people want to go back and listen to your back catalog. So when you looking at pod stats or what have you, like the majority of my stats or from a weekly, you got a spike for whatever your last show is, but they still listening to stuff from 2015, 2016. Like, you got to have a catalog and you got to have something to talk about that I can listen to next year. Sometimes a lot of our content is flavor of the week. What happened with this particular celebrity? Man, 4 years from now, we don't even know who that person is no more. Like, so having something topical uh, that like stands the test of time, yeah, is really the key.
Yeah, that's a thing that I do see, a trend that I do see. Everybody wants to go viral today and make today content and not, lasting content. It's sort of like
Mm.
music. I come from the music industry, and a lot of times it's like, okay, how do I get the people to listen? They're not listening to my deep introspective lyrics and all this music. I'm gonna make a radio hit, boom, and then get the people to come over, and then now they'll go back, like you said, and listen to the rest of my catalog. So I definitely agree when you say that. So let's go back to your journey though. So when you first started, because this is a lot of people. Let's say you did, I don't know what number you got to when it was like, okay, this is something that I'm gonna be doing for a long time. Was it a certain number or episode where you like, okay, this is something I'm gonna be doing for a long time, and this is something I'm gonna dedicate my life to?
Man, it's not really. Honestly, we just recorded episode 451 of Shop Talk. That's where the podcast started, Shop Talk. And I had the idea to do the podcast with me and Dame probably a year and a half, 2 years before we actually recorded. And I had this idea. I think we was going to have the podcast was going to be called, like, we was going to talk about battle rap and boxing. Like, it was going to be ring talk. You know what I'm saying? But I felt like I was the person who kept bullshitting, had this great idea but never did anything. So I just called him like, "Yo, I'm doing it this Friday," or this. It was a Saturday we first recorded, but like, "Hey, pull up," and we did it. And then every single week since, we haven't missed the episode. And I don't know when we got into it, but like, it became a thing where it's like, well, I don't want to miss an episode. Like, I feel like you can't miss an episode. I was following rules that didn't really exist. So we recorded like on a Saturday and we dropped it on that Saturday. It was like almost midnight. But in my brain, well, if you drop the episode on a Saturday, you have to drop every Saturday and you have to do it every week, which is that's not a thing. But I made up this rule like you
Yeah.
have to drop every Saturday. So we would record on Fridays and then drop the next day to give us a little bit more time. But like you podcasting is so cool to me because it's your own business. You can do it what you want to. You can drop weekly, you can drop monthly, you can do whatever you want to. You can't give them less content, but you can always give them more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
That's it. That's a good segue into my next point. So once you start, let's say you got 20, 30 episodes under your belt, you guys have garnered like a real cult following too, over both podcasts, first with the Shop Talk and then in This Week in Culture. So let's start off with the Shop Talk podcast. When you start to garner that, that cult following, how did it make you feel when you just saw, the regular people, the regulars start to come? How did it make you feel? Did it make you give you a lot more motivation? Did you want to make, more content? And how did that make you feel? Because a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people need validation. We need validation as human beings, whether we think or not. Might not need that much, but sometimes you want to have a little bit of validation. So how did that make you feel when you saw that not just people listening to it, but the same people coming back and getting that cult following to come back and listen to you week after week?
um so like when we first started back in the day, we was on SoundCloud. And SoundCloud, if you was logged in, you can see like the username of the people who watched or listened. You know what I'm saying? And them like, yo, this is your top listener. And like I saw like a name from somebody I went to elementary school with that I hadn't talked to since I graduated high school. But and I was like, how they how they find this, right? We don't speak on the socials. I guess we follow each other on Facebook or something. I'm like, damn, they listen there like every week. Like this the top person, and you can see these different usernames. It really made me like get serious though. Like I felt like I had something to like, all right, I can't disappoint type thing. And like, all right, well, if people gonna be listening, I don't want to sound silly. I don't want to sound stupid. I want to make sure that there isn't like a bunch of dead air. I was preparing topics and weeks in advance. We planning out shows. I'm like, it felt like a sense of responsibility. And I always wonder like, well, I wonder how far this can go.
Mhm.
Uh Honestly, what it was is I did music myself, right? And I guess like 2005, 2006, had a company called Black City Government. We put out music, and it was tough to get our music on the radio. So I had started an online radio, an online radio show in my apartment.
Mhm.
You would go to the website blackcitygov.com and you can listen to our episodes and to stream them or you can download them. In real life in 2006, that was a podcast before podcasts like ever invent was we didn't know.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. But like life happened and I stopped doing the online radio show and I saw online radio shows in Detroit like pick up 7 Mile Radio to
Yep.
also a whole bunch of different radio stuff. And I felt like I missed out. I felt like I started this in my living room because when I stopped, uh, Pete, who was the artist, PDPI, his cousin had Street Hop Radio, and he put it in the studio in his basement, and then it went to a physical location, and then a bunch of different radio stations broke off of that. And I was like, man, I think I missed out. Like in my brain, I started this shit, man. I started this, and I missed out. So I didn't want that to happen with podcasts, and so I just never stopped because I saw what happened when I would stop and something take off. So I just was like, I'm just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah. So before, because really the premise of this video is for people who want to start podcasts and people who, a lot of people scared. Like my basic thing, my basic message and whatever I do is like, man, just start. Life's short, time is ticking, just start. And there's a lot of people out there who wanna start podcasts, that's like the new rap. Like remember everybody used to want to be a rapper. Now everybody wanna, make content and do podcasts and
It
things like
got that same connotation too now. Cause before you didn't want to be known as the mixtape rapper. It was cool when you had a mixtape when it was new, but now you rap. But now you this is the term, you a podcast nigga.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, hey, I
But
I, I am.
but this though, to your point right here though, Jay. Now even if we look at the I don't want to get political, but even if we look at the presidential election, one candidate was doing all these podcasts. He was doing all these shows with all these people who are self-made media people. They're not on these big, CNN. Of course they did CNN, they did these other things, but they were on the biggest podcasts, the biggest platforms and things like that. So podcasting and making content and having an audience, man, is attention is the new currency, to be completely honest with you, man. So
It probably
it's
been it's probably been the only currency the whole time.
yeah, true. Very true.
When you think about it, so the attention of others, because when you get money, right, everybody would love money, right? But you got the money because you wanted the attention of the women or your friends or for stature. It's always been about the attention. So you acquire the wealth. I'm show off in front of my boy. Look at this car I got. Look at this, because it's about the attention that comes from when you show it off. So that attention is the drug. It's always been a drug.
True, true, true. So let's jump into podcasting going forward. We got the end of the year. A lot of people be making New Year's resolutions. Probably a lot of New Year's resolutions going to be to start businesses, do this, do that, start a podcast, things like that. Where do you think podcasting is going? Let's start from a social aspect and then a monetary aspect. Because I did read one article talking about how, or it was a statistics article talking about how much money is coming into the creator space, how much money is being poured into podcasting and just people in general who are making content who have garnered that attention, like we just talked about. So starting off, where do you think podcasting is going for like 2025? Let's say the next 2 to 3 years. Do you think it's going to slow down, or do you think it's picking up and is it going exponential?
Oh man, it's interesting, man. I think because when money entered in, then the podcast landscape changed. And I almost feel like it's going through what radio went through, where it's everything is kind of like syndicated.
Yeah,
Everybody want, oh, the Breakfast Club worked, so let's get a quote unquote shock jock, let's get a girl, and let's get, you got these three personalities, and we're gonna replicate this across. We already got a Breakfast Club, we already got a Drink Champs, we already got these things. We don't need like another. But because there's money in there, money involved, like it pulls it in. I got two different things, two different viewpoints or two different splits. One, there's a lot of money, and I feel like everybody right now works for the gambling sites. Everybody, all these major podcasts are sponsored by one of the gambling sites or what
yeah,
have you. And I'm like, man, this used to be such like an independent thing, and now everybody got the same boss. And like, there's a certain way that you can do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I don't want to say any of the sites because they may pay me one day.
yeah. I know the site. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But like, it's tough. And so the route I'm currently on right now is the Patreon side of the game. So with This Week in Culture, we have monetized our Patreon. We got a couple hundred people over there paying, 5, 10, whatever dollars a month, and it's bringing in revenue. And it's like, it's a little bit more freedom. Like, the people who you get a content to are actually the ones that are supporting you, and you feel a deeper connection with those. And those are the ones that like stick around versus a company that's going to pay anybody who's hot. The people who tack on another monthly subscription in a sea of monthly subscriptions, like, they're the ones that really tap in with you. Those are the ones that tell their friends about you or what have you. I think podcasting is fostering like a deeper connection with audience, which is why the advertisers are here, because it takes a more cerebral person to listen to audio without video.
Mhm,
uh Everybody wants a video show and they call it a podcast. Podcast is audio first and foremost,
mhm.
because the truckers can't watch video. We live in Metro Detroit. Everybody in the plant can't have their phone out. It's audio. Like, we gotta make sure that the audio sound good, because like that's king in podcasting. You ain't nothing wrong with YouTube shows, the whole 9 yards. You repurpose the audio, repurpose the content, send the content everywhere, but it fosters like a really, really deep connection. And those are the folks who will buy your merch, come out to your shows and do different things. So I see big business in here for sure, but I do see like a strong connection with audience, and cutting through the ABC, NBC nightly stuff is that's gone the way of the dodo bird. We want to hear what regular people think about these things.
Right. Yeah. True. So if I'm okay, if I'm, I'm a little more well versed in this space already, but if it was just somebody like, let's say somebody coming to you when you had the Shop Talk podcast over at the studio, and somebody like, okay, I want to start this podcast about XYZ. What are some pointers that you could give to somebody brand new, brand spanking new, walking in there and like, all right, you've been doing this a long time. You basically a pro at this. What can you tell me on my first episode, going into my first, let's say like my first 10 episodes? What can you tell me? I know get better. That's the cliche thing to say, but what can you tell me specifically for me to go into this podcast thing and be serious about it?
It's gonna sound cliche, but quite literally, be you. People are not tuning into podcasts because you got the scoop on the information. We all talking about if you a flavor of the week type show, which is nothing wrong with that. Be you, give your authentic voice because they only hear for you. I want to hear what Fred got to say about crypto. Anybody can go on the internet and talk about crypto. I want what you say because I'm tapped in with you. I'm already sold in. Be authentically you. Also, the more niche the idea is or that conversation is, there are a ton of people looking for that specifically.
Mhm.
Like you would, it's so many. It's like 5 million podcasts or something like that. Like it's a ridiculous amount of podcasts. And once your audience are listeners of podcasts, once they finish with your 1 hour show, like give me something else. I need something else. Like give me something else. So being authentically you, they want to hear your voice. Finding that balance of sharing and oversharing. I walk a tight line of I'm a private person, but I live a public life, so it's a very a thin line I have to keep because some of I need for myself. But the more personal you are, the deeper that connection is,
Right.
and consistency. Like it can be embarrassing posting. Let go of your ego. So posting your YouTube content and it's being 7 views on there, it can get to you. You know what I'm saying? It really can get to you. It's not your fault though. There's so many people posting content. How would they find you? That don't mean that content
It's trash.
is trash. That
Yeah.
it's good content, and you never know who is listening and who is watching. Forget that view count. Someone is listening and someone is watching, or someone's gonna forward. It's one kid listening, but you ain't know his uncle owned the business, and your market meets his demand. Oh, I've been trying to get into 44 to 55-year-old age base, and hey, Shop Talk, that's where y'all 47% of y'all listeners are from this and 23% in this, and yeah, you know what I mean? Like, so you gotta show up like you don't know who's listening.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Even with me, like when it comes to like like you never know, like because on my other channel or what I do with the investing channel and things like that, especially in like the crypto space, it's a really niche space. It really ain't nobody who look like me, to be completely honest with you. So that's a good point that you said. A lot of people can come over and resonate to things, and even if you don't, if you stand out in a good way or in a bad way, you still it's somebody who can resonate with you and things like that. And like you said, no, you never know who's listening, you never know who's watching, and like you said, somebody can just be tuning in to something, and then your podcast will pop up, and they listen to 2-3 minutes, and they're like, "Oh, I like this," and they
And
might be the CEO or something, or know a CEO or the cousin or something. So like you said, you never know.
I was listening to Tyler the Creator in an interview, and he said that something very similar. He said he found like 3 or 4 of one of the producers he have like that's in his camp.
Yeah,
Like I found him on YouTube on a video that had 26 views on it. And he was like, "This is amazing." He said he called him immediately and reached out, like, "I need to get you here in LA, like right now." Like it don't matter. You have no idea who's on the other side of that screen or who's playing your podcast at work and somebody walk by like, "Yo, what's that?"
yeah,
Um, there's so many people. So Shop Talk, we talk about everything: race, religion, politics, sports, everything. This Week in Culture, we do television shows and movie reviews, dealing around black TV shows around the culture and whatnot. On the Patreon side, however, we put all the white excellence over there. White excellence is on the Patreon side, and the Patreon is up. Okay, so if you watch like Landman, Silo, all that good stuff, it's over there.
Billions. I think I
Yeah,
seen on there too, wasn't it?
yeah. But like so many people have reached out to us like, hey, I was on the podcast app looking for a podcast talking about snowfall. I was looking for a podcast that was talking about whatever your niche is. Somebody's on a podcast in Apple Podcasts right now. They typed in crypto because they're looking for a podcast about crypto. Someone typed in about crochet because they are crochet podcasting and there are crochet videos out there. Whatever you and YouTube, which is the number 2 search engine in the world, they gonna serve you what you're looking for. So people who like crocheting, they timeline filled with crochet videos. If you like crypto, I got a whole bunch of crypto videos, probably because of you, in my timeline. They're like, oh, that's what you're watching? I'll give you more of that. So whatever you doing, I know you may not know anybody that does your niche podcast, but I promise you there are people who are looking for that content, and app or a service like YouTube will serve that content. It will find the people that you need to be put in front of. You just got to make sure the content is good when they listen to it.
Yeah. And you made another good point. I want to go back to your first point about being yourself. A lot of people, even if it's like in a lot of people, I liken it back to music, because if a song or a certain type of sound is going on, everybody tries to emulate that sound, or everybody tries to emulate that specific song, or however that artist or something like that.
Yeah.
In podcasting, I've seen the same thing. A lot of people, chasing the same type of content, or trying to act like somebody, or building a team that looks exactly like a team that already made it on another podcast and things like that. So I definitely second that first point that you made. And then the third point that you made is consistency. So it's an up and down game. I probably quit 30 times this year, to be complete. Like, I'd be quit. I mean, I ain't never gonna quit. But in your head, you just be like, dang man, like why am I? Especially when you've been doing something so long, and you're not. Sometimes it's a money thing. If you come to it with a money aspect, a lot of times you get burnt out real quick. That's on anything. So you have to really like what you do. You have to really love what you do. So how do you battle, some of those ups and downs, really the downs, when you're doing podcasts? Because you've been doing it for 9 years, almost a decade. And all the time hasn't been just peaches and cream.
No, it hasn't.
How do you manage, or how do you handle these ups and downs in life, and then in the podcast world in general? Because when life happens, that affects the podcast. So how do you deal with all that?
Man, major, man. Yeah, that's a word actually, because so podcasting specifically has become, I love it. It's become second nature. It has become therapy, but it's a labor of love because it is not easy. Like this is the longest thing I've done in my entire life. I have never done anything this long before. I've never been committed to something this long for this period of time. And since starting podcasting, I mean, my mom passed in 2017. We went through that. Dame father passed. Dame almost died. We did an episode. He was in his hospital bed. You know what I'm saying? Like, we just decided, like, no matter what happens, we not gonna stop doing this thing. But it's become like therapy. Like the episode I recorded, like when my mom passed, like so many people reached out because they could hear the pain and hurt in my voice, but it wasn't the episode wasn't like about that, but just different thing. Like
Or you walk that thin line. You
yeah,
didn't have to say it, but you said it because you wanted that connection that you had built with your audience.
yeah. I mean, I've been recording Friday nights for the last almost 10 years. You know what I'm saying? It's a strain on my personal life, how I started monetizing the podcast was through the podcast studio initially. Right. I'm like, well, how do I make some money doing this? So every single episode that ever released through the studio had, this episode was recorded at Shop Talk Podcast Studios. Here's the website.
Right.
that type of thing. So like I had to find, well, how do I monetize this? All right, well, I know I was paying a different studio roughly $200 a month just to record 4 times a week. I mean, 4 times a month. So I'm like, all right, bought me a space, and well, how do I get my money back? So we started monetizing through the studio, and then through events, and then through merch, and then This Week in Culture through Patreon. So you'll find something that keeps you going, but it's really not. I mean, don't want to make money, because that's that would be a lie. But the whole thing can't be about the money. Like the highest paid podcaster in the world right now, the number one podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan, did that podcast for 10 years before anybody cared. 10 years. So as I'm reaching 9 years, in June, I'm like, listen, if it took him 10, I could put my 10 in for sure.
Yeah.
Because I see what that looks like when it pays off. And I have people who have listened to every single episode over the last 9 years. That's crazy, you know. But it's a grind, and I'm not giving up. And it's tough, but record when you don't want to record. Just like go to the gym when you don't want to go to the gym. Then be the ones. I mean, there's episodes I'm not proud of, right? Where I didn't think, I kind of mailed that one in. And then somebody hit you up, was like, man, I needed that this week. You said such and such and such and such. I'm like, see, you know what? It went from being a thing I do every week. This is spiritual to a certain level. Like people like, listen, I got laid off. I was down in the dumps. Y'all got me through the toughest period of my life because I was tapped in. Or when you shared this story about what your family did, I've taken your family tradition and molded it into my life or whatever. So it's like, man, this is bigger than just, it's bigger than trying to get some views on a YouTube channel or something. Like this impact my life. Like I don't even know what I would do if I couldn't share and get my thoughts out and release how I do. Pause. On the pod. It's quite literally therapy for me and others.
Yeah. You know what, man? And I definitely second that. And when people come in and tell you how much you helped or things like that, even though, sometimes you don't want to do something, and then that be the one that really resonate with other people. And it might be the one you hate the most, but it might resonate with the most people. So like you said, that goes back into consistency, and just doing the podcast or doing whatever. Like all this stuff really correlates to whatever you're doing. It don't even have to be a podcast. We just specifically talking about podcasts and things like that, but it can resonate with whatever you're doing, man. Just you gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable, man. That's what I keep telling people, man. So lastly, I really want to talk about, because we talked about some good points, but let's talk about the money. We got to talk about the money, because this is the Wealth Rant Podcast. But wealth is bigger than money. It's a whole bunch of different factors. But let's definitely talk about the money and the monetization side, because I'm pretty familiar with it now in a new sense. But you've been, like you basically broke down how you've been monetizing and things like that. So you said you had the building, or you had the space where you were charging people, to come and do that. Then you got the Patreon, the merch. What do you think?
Ads too, though. So like the ad thing is important, and knowing your data is important. And so there's different types of data, right? So people be like, oh, X amount of people downloaded my podcast. They don't even use download data no more, because that's not important. It's not even real, right? When you're back in the day, when you subscribed to a podcast, you downloaded the episodes weekly, no matter what. You might not even listen to them, but they was downloaded on your phone, right? So the download data is one thing. If you listen to more than, I don't know, 14, 15 seconds of it, it count as a listen. But like that don't really tell the story. How long did you listen? Right. So like Spotify gives some good data, and then Apple gives different data. So Spotify will tell you this how many people listen to this episode. This is their age range. This is where they at in the country. This is the device that they listened on. 70%, 80% is on Apple Podcasts. Another 30% is on this, and people listen from their iPad or whatever. On the Apple side of the game, you'll get some data that says your average consumption rate of this particular episode is 80%. So you dropped a 2-hour podcast and people listen to 80% of it. or for This Week in Culture, we do long form reviews. So some of the episodes was 3 hours, and you had 90% of a 3 hour episode. The reason that's important is because if you got a 2 hour pod, if you got an hour pod and people only make it to 30% of it or 50% of it, shorten your pod. No one's hearing, no one's hearing the rest of it. But if you do have a long retention rate into the first hour, into the second hour, when you talk about ads and where you place ads at and how much you can charge for an ad, that's where that comes into play. Well, if I know that I have an ad about movies and TV shows, and I know a specific male to female ratio and a particular age range ratio, well, that's what I sell to advertisers. Like, what do you I need to get in front of women who are from 24 to 44 who in a, all right, well, I got that right here for you. And they actively are tapped in because I'm just talking about audio stats, not YouTube, audio stats. So a cerebral person who is listening to something without visual stimulation are more susceptible to an ad. It's just what it is. And if you have the data, you know who your ad targets. That's how you position yourself. Don't go ask for $4,000 for a 30-second ad read because you are not generating $4,000 based on that ad, right? Exactly. A lot of money came in podcasting early and it left because they didn't get a return on the investment. So the podcast money dropped for a hot second because, oh, Pepsi's giving this, everybody's giving all this money, but we're not seeing a return on your investment. So now you start seeing promo codes, use code such and such. Now we're gonna find out who you really bring it to us.
So that's more like affiliate deals.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And honestly, it's a fair way. We gave this podcast $40,000 to promote our brand, and we ain't sell no mattresses because we listen to a hip hop podcast. What I want to buy a mattress for?
Exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you this though, and this is just a personal question for me because I don't know. YouTube, I'm pretty familiar with like the YouTube analytics and YouTube algorithm and things like that. But now when I start pumping this podcast out, my Wealth Rant Podcast, is it something like you brought up audience retention? Is that something that will push you up in the rankings when somebody's like searching or things like that? How long somebody has listened to your podcast, and if the majority of people listen to 80-90% of the podcast, would it be higher in the search bar as opposed to somebody who's only getting, their podcast is only getting listened to 20-30% of their podcast? How does that algorithm work? Is it some sort of algorithm in like
100% an algorithm? YouTube changes theirs often, just like Instagram changes it often. YouTube specifically, however, they will judge you based upon when we offer your content to not somebody that subscribe to you. When you put your content in front of a stranger, how many people click on it? How many people pass it? And other those who clicked on it, how many people actually stay and watch? So somebody who does not follow you, that they present the content in front of them to see if they're gonna like it. If they click it and they stay to watch, I know this is good, so I'm gonna put it in front of more people, because YouTube job is to get you in front of content that you like, so I can serve you ads. And I'm not putting it in front of somebody if they're not gonna watch it. I just need you to stay long enough for I can get me an ad off on this one. So it does matter. Your thumbnail matters because YouTube will offer, now you can do like A/B testing with thumbnails. So you can test two different thumbnails and say which one of these work the best. Are we gonna go with this one? Because we offered this to the 10,000 people, and 40% of them said they like this, the blue one. This percent said they like the red one. Or you'll get a message to say it was negligible or what have you. So your content matters. Right now, depending on the genre, longer form content, which historically hasn't worked, is working now. But it really just depends on the content. Used to be like the sweet spot on YouTube was like 8 to 10 minutes. Now it's longer content.
It's definitely longer form, because my long form videos get me a lot more just views and a lot more just audience retention when it comes to those long form videos. And then like on Apple Music, Spotify, things like that, or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it's a bunch of them that I used to put my podcast on. Tidal, I think, does Tidal have one? I think they have something like podcast.
They used to have like specific Tidal podcasts or what have you. I'm glad them podcast wars kind of ended, where it was like you gotta listen here, or you gotta. I'm glad that ended because that it separated the market.
So does it have just when you just listening to pure audio on these platforms, do they have some type of algorithm or something like that that'll push your podcast up, or does somebody just have to actually search for your podcast or
They
search?
got algorithms for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's algorithms for sure. When you upload a podcast, and it's like the algorithm game's so tough because like once you're not in the algorithm, it's hard to get in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's hard to get in it. But like so for an example, like a couple months ago, This Week in Culture, we the number one podcast in TV and film in Tanzania. I'm like, all right, you know, I don't know nobody in Tanzania, but they apparently messing with us. But there is an algorithm. Like, so Spotify will tell you now because Anchor was purchased by Spotify. So everything used to be Anchors, but now it's Anchor, Spotify, whatever. They'll tell you how many times someone crossed your podcast. How many times it was just visible. Somebody scrolled and saw your logo or saw one of your episodes. Not necessarily like clicked on it. But like how let me see if I can pull it up right now. See if it'll tell me how visibility. All right, in the last week, my last episode, 1,000 people have seen it, whether they clicked on it or not. 1,009 people. In the last 7 days. Let me go to This Week in Culture. Boom. This was as 4,300 people have looked at the last episode. And that's not even whether they listened to it, stay or whatever. Like your podcast came up in somebody's search or when they was looking or suggested, like 4,000 people in the last 7 days saw your pod. Now, if you got that many eyes on it, maybe you should probably have a pretty cool graphic. Maybe you should have maybe you should spend some time in the wording of the description. Because if I've never listened to it before, I don't know what this about. So they give you some good stats.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it man, like you said, that algorithm, man, it's so hard to get in it, and sometimes you in it and you don't stay in it. But I've seen channels, man, like go from even on YouTube. The YouTube algorithm is very, very hard. But once you're in it, I seen a channel go from like 1,500. They got in that algorithm. They're at like 40K in like a few months. So it definitely can happen once you get in the algorithm. But you like you said, man, all your 3 points that you talked about, that third one really resonate with me is like being consistent, and that's really what anything of value of anything of that you want to keep going.
So look at this. So this is new data they're giving out. So they say in the last 30 days. So I upload my audio to Spotify, right? So the data that Spotify gives is only on Spotify though. Because if you listen to listen to it on Apple Podcasts, we don't got the data for it. And almost 80% of my listeners come from Apple. They listen on Apple Podcasts. So they say from Spotify, 524 hours of listening consumption has been done in the last 30 days. Like that is valuable time. That's valuable information that you can give to an advertising company. Well, here go 524 hours of advertising space. And that's just in the last 30 days. Well, let's go for the last year. Well, I got $1 million worth of listening. Don't you want to put some ads over here? Matter of fact, here's how it breaks down. My audience is this percent woman, this percent this is on this portion of the country. I like Spotify anchors because they do offer ads once you get to a certain listenership or whatever. So I got the ads on and they dynamic. So they'll put the space in there and whoever they're going to send the ad changes. So they'll send it to whomever. And, they just send you the check. They send you a direct deposit of the ad. So like you can make money where you don't physically have to go find an ad. They'll serve them up for you. But there's a local shop in your neighborhood. There's a shoe shop or a sneaker repair or whatever. Man, go talk to these people. Get
Put the
some
work.
money.
Yeah. It's
$50
definitely
here, $20 here, $60 here. You bring it in hundreds of dollars a month, and it don't take that much time.
Yeah. Definitely don't, man. It take a lot of effort though. It don't take a lot of time. And this is what I equated to because I'm starting to really get paid off of making content. So and not even on the investment side. I just really started with the investment side and I just start talking about it. We just some dudes from the hood from Detroit, and we autodidacts though. I had to break this down to somebody. A lot of people, it's a lot of information out there, but they're not teaching us, these things. They still teaching us like the old ways to do things. They're still trying to gatekeep and do all this other stuff. With all the information out there right now, man, it's no excuse to be ignorant unless you want to be ignorant, unless you want to be ignorant. And if you willing for ignorance is stupidity to me. That's
Yeah.
my thing for 2025. But back to when it comes to like the podcast and creating content, man, before we get out of here, what do you have to say to just like the whole if you could just talk to everybody in podcasting and just be like, all right, this is what needs to happen in podcasting for us to continue this path forward because the path forward is still up when it comes to people listeners, when it comes to watchers, when it comes to money. Where do you think it needs to go, or how do you think it needs to continue in order for this to be a sustained thing for like the next decade or even more than that?
One, there is no more barriers. Years ago, you had to come see me inside of a studio to record a podcast. Right now, they got so many wireless microphones and cell phones. Like you can do the entire podcast on your cell phone. I record, even though I got all the equipment, I connect my equipment to an iPad sometimes because I just want to. You know what I mean? There is no barrier. You can do whatever you want to, wherever you want to, whenever you want to. Second is stop chasing the wave and talk about stuff that you want to talk about because I promise you there's another person who wants to talk about that too. It doesn't have to be the world is full with Kendrick Lamar breakdown videos. I'm a Kendrick Lamar breakdown video type of person. So that's content for me that I would love. But if that's not I saw a cooking channel do a breakdown of Kendrick Lamar lyrics. So this is a cooking channel. Stop it. Stop it. Get some help. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, don't be so thirsty for the views that you're not putting this art at the end of the day. It's really art. And sometimes you may go to Art Basel and there is a banana taped to a wall with some duct tape. Maybe like, come on, cut it out.
Shout out to Justice Son, man. I actually know him. Yeah,
Right.
Co-founder. Yeah. Shout out
But
to
some people be like, all right, you got to chill. But then you go in there and it's some great painting from this person with this like it's art. And some people it's art, so treat it like art, man. Do your due diligence. Specifically though, make sure that your audio is great. Okay, no one's listening to bad audio. You'll suffer through a bad video. I'm not suffering through no bad audio at all.
True. So man, that's pretty much it, man. I just, this is the first episode of this series. When I bring on different people from different walks of life, different avenues, different life arenas, different just different paths, man. But it all correlates to wealth, and you can definitely become wealthy in podcasting. And like you said, it's also a spiritual journey, man. So you can become wealthy spiritually. You can therapy wise, like just therapeutic. It's a lot of things that just talking and making content and starting a podcast and things like that you can do, man. So I appreciate you coming on, man. We're gonna have this out ASAP. I think this is something that because I wanted to put this out because those 2025 New Year's resolutions is coming, and I think this is going to be one of them. Like I'm gonna
Yeah,
start a podcast. I'm gonna start a podcast in 2025. So here you go. You want to start a podcast in 2025?
yeah, man.
Here's your guide.
Reach out to me. I know some consultation. I'll tell you what audio equipment to purchase, what you should use to edit your stuff, the whole 9 yards. I'm a resource, so I'll do that. Make sure you go listen to Shop Talk Podcast. Make sure you go listen to This Week in Culture. Make sure you follow Jay Johnson 313 on YouTube because YouTube is it's tough to crack. I've given up and came back and given up and came back to YouTube. I had made it like I'm not putting no more videos on YouTube. I'm giving away for free. And then I'm like, well, if you don't ever put it on there, it's never gonna get bigger. So it's like I got to.
Yeah.
So
yeah, all his links will be in the description, and if you're listening to this on the audio, Can you put it in the description on the audio? Like, I don't even know how that works. Like, you can do all that.
You can hyperlinks the whole 9 yards, you know.
I'm learning too, man. So this was not only something for the people, it was something for me too, man. So I appreciate you coming on, man. And I'll see you in a minute, man. We'll talk after this.
For sure.